Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon here at the latest news from across the continent of Africa. We start with the latest from the Democratic Republic of Congo on Pope Francis's visit. And the Pope on Wednesday celebrated Mass for about 1 million people, invited Congo's people to forgive those who committed inhumane violence against them, and then heard firsthand of the atrocities some of them had endured. During the intimate encounter at the Vatican Embassy in Kinshasa, the Pope listened and sought to shine a spotlight on what he called a forgotten genocide. The Pontiff also appealed to those who plunder, scourge and destabilize the turbulent region to lay down their weapons on the second day of his visit, which is today. Today is his third day, his meeting with a group of over 60,000 youths of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we shall bring you the latest of that meeting later. We head over to Morocco. Spain's Prime Minister was welcomed on Wednesday by his Moroccan counterpart Aziz Akanouch. Pedro Sanchez and Akanouch presided over an economic forum in Rabat. The Spaniards' trip to the North Africa's kingdom is aimed to further mending ties after a deep diplomatic crisis between the two countries was resolved last year. As both countries seal agreements today, Sanchez and a dozen ministers are set to meet with top members of the Moroccan government. Spain's Prime Minister said the sides also aim to completely normalize the passage of people and goods crossing points. Spain is the third largest investor in Morocco. And Chadian President Mohamed Deby met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday. Mohamed Deby is visiting Israel to open the Central African nation's embassy in the Jewish state, building on economic diplomatic relations established 5 years ago. In 2019, during Netanyahu's last term, he and late President Idris Deby Itno, Mohamed Deby's father, announced the establishment of diplomatic relations. The elder Deby, who ruled the Muslim-majority nation for more than 3 decades, was killed in 2021 on the battlefield in a fight against jihadist rebels. His son replaced him as president at the head of a military junta. Upon landing in Israel, Deby was received at the airport by Mossad Chief David Barnier. The Chadian delegation then headed to Mossad headquarters in Glilot for a celebratory meeting. Mossad played a central role in maintaining quiet ties with Chad after 1972 and is working towards full normalization in recent years. Netanyahu and Deby will open the embassy today. Open the embassy today on its location and are yet to be specified. Most countries keep embassies in Tel Aviv, because embassies are supposed to be in the capital city of a country. Now, South Africa is pursuing a sponsorship deal with Premier League club Tottenham, following in the footsteps of United Arab Emirates, Rwanda, Malta and others who have used the world's biggest soccer league to promote their countries. The Ministry of Tourism said on Wednesday it was looking to conclude a memorandum of understanding with Tottenham through South African Tourism, which is the tourism marketing arm of the government. South African media reports claim the deal will be worth 48 million euros over 3 years from the start of the 2023 to 2024 season and give South African tourism branding space on Tottenham's uniform, among other things. The Ministry of Tourism didn't give financial details of the deal and said it must still gain final approval from the government. Right now, the proposal was to conclude a memorandum of understanding with Tottenham, the ministry confirmed. Now, Tottenham's North London rival Arsenal has a Visit Rwanda message on its shirt sleeve, while UAE's two official airlines, Emirates and Etihad, are the principal sponsors of Arsenal and Manchester City, respectively. Manchester United has an agreement to promote a Mediterranean island nation of Malta. The proposed deal was criticized by South African opposition party, which said the money reportedly involved, which is equivalent to more than 900 million South African rand, represented nearly 40% of South Africa's tourism budget. The party Action South Africa also questioned who would benefit from some of the other parts of the deal for South Africa. All right, and up to half of the medicines available in the Sahel region are either substandard or out of date. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, has warned. The inferior drugs are withdrawn from the supply chain in Europe and to a lesser extent from China and India. They then often pass through seaports in Guinea, Ghana, Benin and Nigeria before being transported to the Sahel. The UNODC report published on Tuesday highlights Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger and Chad as the hardest hit countries. Worse, once the medicines are diverted from the officially supplied chain, there is little guidance on how it should be used by the patients. These deficiencies contribute to microbial and anti-malaria resistance, the Office of the United Nations added. The United States has called on Tunisia to show greater democratic inclusion amid a low turnout at recent parliamentary elections. Just 11% of voters took part in a second round of elections that ended on Sunday. The low voter turnout, according to the U.S., reflects a dire need for the government to engage in a more inclusive path towards moving forward and expand political participation. The State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel said opposition parties boycotted the poll, accusing the president of staging a coup, and he shut down parliament in 2021 and gave himself almost unlimited executive powers. Mr. Said has defended the low turnout as a sign of discontent with parliament, but not him. Okay, we head over to Nigeria. And Nigeria's electoral body says nearly 800 ballots and over 200 voting cubicles were destroyed during an attack on one of its offices in southeastern state of Anambra. The attack comes less than a month to the country's general election. The police in Anambra State said gunmen invaded the office of the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) in Ojoto in the early hours of Wednesday. Police spokesperson Tochukwu Ikenga told journalists that the group also attacked a police station and a residential building located within the same vicinity. He said that a teenager was killed and another sustained injury and was taken to the hospital. It is the latest in the series of attacks on the Electoral Commission's offices in the region, where the separatist group Biafra allegedly is active and is being accused of carrying out some of these attacks. The attacks targeting the electoral body's office has raised questions on the security of election officials and materials in the run-up to the polls. 2 weeks ago, the European Union said the elections may not be held in some parts of the country due to a hostile security climate. EU official Rudolf Elbling said such an eventuality would raise a lot of legal implications for the entire process. The Electoral Commission has previously said that there will be no delays to the elections despite insecurity in some parts of the country. And the top leadership or synod of Ethiopia's Orthodox Church, the largest religious denomination in the country, has threatened to call for a nationwide rallies to be held by its Patriarch Abuna Matthias. The church has criticized Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's recent sentiments regarding rogue clergy involved in the appointment of bishops without its knowledge. Mr. Abiy's lengthy remarks broadcast on the national television on Tuesday came after the church synod excommunicated the breakaway clergy who are from the country's Oromia region. He warned his cabinet members against getting involved in the church's affair. However, he said both sides have truths. The synod said the Prime Minister's remarks disregarded its decision, challenged its authority, and have recognition to an illegitimate power-hungry group. Some of Mr. Abiy's statements were misleading. The church leadership added. The breakaway clergy accused the church of maintaining a system of linguistic and cultural hegemony in which congregations in Oromia are not served in their native languages. The church has since denied the accusations. The breakaway clergy said they had overwhelmingly public support after touring some areas in the conflict-prone Western Oromia. The synod's statement comes amid accusations among the faithful that authorities are supporting the breakaway clergy. It accuses the government of harassing and detaining its senior figures. It vows to continue to speak out even if they, referring to the senior religious leaders, have to sacrifice their lives. Relationships between Abiy's administration and the church, which boasts nearly a half of Ethiopia's 110 million population as its adherents, were positive in the early days of his tenure. However, in recent years, members of the faith group have reported being targeted. We head over to Sudan, and the United States says it is deeply concerned over the release this week of a Sudanese man facing death penalty in connection with the killing of a U.S. diplomat 15 years ago. The Sudanese authorities on Monday freed Abdel Rauf Abu Zaid, who was convicted over the killing of John Granville and his Sudanese driver Abdulrahman Abbas. They were shot dead by Islamist gunmen in New Year's Day in 2008. The State Department denied that the release was part of an agreement by both countries. It said it was troubled by the lack of transparency in the legal process. And then we head over to Malawi. The head of Malawi's Anti-Corruption Bureau, Martha Chizuma, has been suspended over a leaked piece of audio in which she can allegedly be heard discussing official matters with a person not employed by her office. The comments that she allegedly made could prejudice the trial of people charged with corruption. The audio was leaked a year ago. At the time, President Lazarus Chakwera said that it was recorded and circulated in a bid to force him to sack her. Ms. Chizuma remained in the job with the president's backing and went ahead to indict several high-profile officials, including Vice President Saulos Chilima, a cabinet minister, and various corruption-related charges. They have denied the wrongdoing. But on Wednesday, her suspension was announced by the Secretary to Cabinet, Colin Zamba, but some legal experts have questioned the protocol used. President Chakwera's office has not commented on the suspension. The regional leaders who met in Somalia have agreed on a joint offensive operation against Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab. The search and destroy operation will boost the momentum built up by government forces who have made huge gains over the past few months, including recovering territory controlled by Al-Qaeda-affiliated group. It did not provide any details about the operation. Al-Shabaab, which launched mortar shells in Mogadishu ahead of the leaders' meeting, has not responded to a request for a comment that was made by several news agencies. The militant group has been fighting since 2006. To topple Somalia's central government and establish its own rule based on its strict interpretation of the Islamic Sharia law. It occasionally attacks hotels, military bases, and government establishments in Somalia and across the region. So the ones who are meeting were the East African leaders. The meeting happened yesterday in Mogadishu. And then the press here saw little progress in tackling global corruption due to greater violence and insecurity, according to the Organization of Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index 2022. However, there are some encouraging signs that corruption is being successfully tackled in some parts of Africa. Most of the world continues to fail in the fight against corruption. 95% of countries have made little to no progress since 2017. According to the report, and governments hampered by corruption lack the capacity to protect the people, while public discontent is more likely to turn into violence. This vicious cycle is impacting countries everywhere from South Sudan to Brazil. For the 6th year running, South Sudan, Syria and Somalia are at the bottom of Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. Some African nations have made significant progress that are rising on the index, including Angola, Ivory Coast, Ethiopia, and Senegal. And 7 of the 24 countries improving are actually in Africa. Many of them have also ramped up their anti-corruption commitments. There's been a lot of work also within the framework of the African Union to have the fight against corruption. That is what Transparency International is saying. The countries that have made progress, I think that's a good move. But this framework within the African Union that also has worked to fight corruption, I don't know about that. But let's just move on to South Sudan. And a report by the United Nations mission in South Sudan suggesting a buildup of Agwelek forces in Upper Nile State is untrue. That is according to the deputy commander of Agwelek, The statement comes a day after the UN mission said concerns over the reported buildup of the Agulek forces in the Upper Nile state in the past few days. The Troika also expressed concerns about reports of preparations for renewed fighting in the state. According to UNIMIS, the buildup of forces might pose security threats to civilians and affect humanitarian operations in Upper Nile and northern Jonglei. The UN mission called on the country's leaders to prevent further escalation of tensions in the Upper Nile region. In response, the second-in-command of the Agulek forces, General Paromi Ankui Otieno, denied the report, saying the group did not conduct build-up in the area. According to him, the forces are confined to their military bases in areas of North Jonglei, and that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Usually such reports by the United Nations, which are presented to the United Nations security forces like this one in South Sudan, they do a thorough investigation and they work to collect data. Remember, these missions by the United Nations are outside of just the peacekeeping or peace building or whatever mandate they have in a country. Key part of their mandate also is to collect data, do some monitoring and all these things. So they collect data and they know, and they have very good surveillance systems. They know. So South Sudan, I would like to believe what this official, the deputy commander of Agulek, is saying. But if there are even remotely truth to what this report says, which I think I will go with that report. Like I said, these missions, United Nations missions in these different countries, they really take their time to collect data. They really take their time to do the monitoring and all that, because that is part of their mandate, even as they continue with engagements in these countries. Sorry, that they have been deployed, because that is part of also gauging the kind of progress they're making in these areas during this mission. So unless I'm proven, there's a different proof to that, but I will pick on this report. So it was presented to the United Nations, and it suggested they are part of a build-up of forces in readiness to fight. All right, so the Pope is heading over to South Sudan tomorrow. So I don't know if such reports these are not the things we want to hear right now. We thought for some moment there that progress was being made so much in South Sudan as far as just getting a peaceful resolution is concerned. But recently there has been concerns with the rising tensions and conflicts and killings and all that, it has been very worrying. So just negating every progress that has been made so far. I don't know if the Pope's visit there, Pope is heading there tomorrow, like I've said. I don't know if that will make any difference, or they just, I don't know. But anyway, the leaders there, church leaders, I think, have called on South Sudanese to pray today as Pope makes his trip tomorrow to that country. So they're engaging in prayers today, and they're praying for a safe trip, and we hope that is the case. But I don't know if Pope's presence there will make any difference. I'm a bit skeptical, the same way I'm skeptical about him going to the DRC, which is the first story that we started with, and Pope took his time to just listen to some of the horrific stories by the victims who have gone through this this horror of the conflict that is in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And I was just reading through, and I couldn't, because it's just too much. It's just too much. And from just a human standpoint, there are things that could traumatize you. I think there's a 16-year-old boy who was saying he saw his father's head being chopped off in front of him, and his mother, I guess, being raped and also murdered. So you can imagine the kind of trauma this child will live with for the rest of his life. Your father's head being chopped off while you're just standing there, and your mother being raped and then also kidnapped, and then later she was murdered, and other horrific, horrendous stories. The height of human rights abuses that have been ongoing. And Pope, I like that he knows that his voice is important, and he's using it And I like the way he's using his position and his voice. Like I said here yesterday when we were having this conversation, I think for Pope, he's had it. It's like enough with pacifying this genocide that is ongoing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he's saying this is a forgotten genocide. We are so used to hearing the DRC fighting and murders and all these things that we have been desensitized, that we don't see it for what it is. And the Pope is reminding us, hey, there is a genocide ongoing right here, and we are taking it so lightly when so many people continue to perish from this. But what I like most about the messaging he's been giving since he arrived, no, in fact from Sunday when he gave his during his sermon at the Vatican as he was preparing to visit the DRC. And he's calling out these Western powers for the violence. He's calling them out for their, for their contribution to this violence, which is the economic, how they've been making money off these conflicts and how they've been taking advantage of the minerals and the natural resources, especially in a country like the Democratic Republic of Congo, because this has gone further to contribute to these conflicts and to the destabilization of this country. So he's saying this plunder, this scourge, this has to stop. This has to stop. And I like that he is consistent with that messaging. But I don't know if these countries that we know have been benefiting from a country like DRC, I don't know if they even care that Pope is saying this. But I like that he's taking a very bold step and he's not afraid to use his very important voice to highlight and bring attention. And I'm just perhaps one of the upsides of his visit to the DRC. As he says, this is largely a forgotten war. You know, sometimes you talk about it so much, and then until it becomes like it's DRC. People are always fighting, so it's normal. But the Pope is saying no. So I like that perhaps his presence there will bring a renewed attention and a renewed vigor and a renewed effort in trying to find a solution to this conflict. And those who have been mentioned, or who are thought to be responsible, perhaps might be held accountable. So I'm glad that he's there, although I don't know if him saying what he's saying and him calling out the people that he's calling out, if it will bring any difference. But I know that perhaps it will shine a new spotlight to what has already been ongoing there with the DRC. So let's just see how that will work out as we continue. The Chadian President Mohamed Deby met with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. I guess because now the Western powers are shunning them away, these countries, especially that have been suspended from the African Union, and they have broken ties with the regional blocs because of, but no, in Chad, not really. In Chad, they were not removed from the African Union, even after the president came to power in a way that was contrary to the constitution. But and Chad is a good. France has a key interest there in Chad, and it participated, and it had a huge role in the transition after President Idris Deby died in 2000 and. As it in 21, he was killed when he went to join the army in the battlefield against these rebel groups there. So he's trying to mend ways. I guess Chad had broken ties, with Israel for quite a long time. Since 1972, something must have happened there. So they're looking to open their embassy in Tel Aviv. And also I think a lot of it had also to do with the support of Palestine, because Chad, we know, is a Muslim majority nation, and a lot of Muslim majority nations have took a stand against Israel over its continued conflict with Palestine. So but there has been a renewed way of diplomatic engagement now, and a lot of these majority Muslim countries, slowly they're warming up to Israel. But I don't know why they will choose to do that. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just came back, and in the few days that he's been back in power, he's quite rightist. He's having very controversial policies, and the people that he's even appointed in some of these key positions in his government, and the decisions that he's making, it's quite on the extreme. So I don't know why Chad will choose that this will be the person they want to rebuild this relationship. But I guess there's something that they're looking out, and maybe that could benefit the two countries. Okay, so this issue of South Africa wanting to sponsor Tottenham Hotspur. Look, first of all, I'll not even get into the details, because if you're looking for a football update from me, I'll give you the wrong information. So I'll just look at this sponsorship that South Africa wants to give this team. And if I say a team wrong, please correct me. You're free to do that down there in the comment section. And they're saying, because we've seen a lot of these international football teams, especially in those famous leagues like the La Liga, the English Premier League, and Bundesliga, and these others, they attract a lot of sponsorships from countries, from corporations, from companies. So South Africa is thinking that this could be a good platform to promote the country's tourism. So they're planning to perhaps use about 48 million euros over 3 years, and that translates to about 900 million South African rand. And according to the opposition, this represents nearly 40% of South Africa's tourism budget. All right, so they're using the tourism budget. Now, if that is within the tourism budget, and then the remainder of 60%, they're able to use it, but this will not eat up into other important things. Because initially when I was reading this story, I was very conflicted. Why would South Africa go to support a whole team in Europe, while perhaps it does not offer that much amount of support in its own local teams there? Bafana, I know they've been struggling to do well, and also their local league, I can't remember what it's called, but I've seen, I know the Kaisers, I know maybe 2 or 3, very passionate teams like we have here in Kenya. I think they'll be likened to AFC or Gor Mahia. There are a few teams that really, in a league that really stands out, especially in Africa. So the country has not invested that much as far as its local talent is concerned, but it has no problem using this kind of money to support a team that is already wealthy, a team that already has other sponsors. So in that regard, I was a bit conflicted. But then again, maybe this will be a good opportunity to market South Africa's, tourism. Look, Kenya, I hope you're not thinking to try to get ideas. You keep branding those buses in London. That's enough. We're not sponsoring any teams because we don't have that kind of a budget, first of all. So I think, on the other hand, if they're just using part of the money that has already been located for branding South Africa and for tourism budget, then that's fine. The 40% from that budget, that's okay. And then the other 60, they can use it on other matters also related to that. But if it is going to mean that other important things will be forfeited for them to be able to take care of this, then that will be a problem. Okay, so I'm a little conflicted, but also would understand. Remember, we are coming from COVID-19, and one of the key industries or sectors, especially around Africa, that was greatly affected is the tourism industry and the hospitality industry. So if you can get these people back here, anyway, if you're spending money in Tottenham, their supporters out there will come back and spend that money in your country. I guess that's how that works. And maybe they've done their survey, they've done their research, so they know this is a very good target market. And these Premier Leagues, they're watched across the world. So the rest of the world, if they do very good branding, it could be a great opportunity. So Okay, fine. I was a bit conflicted when I was starting with this story, but now the more I talk about it and look at it from a different perspective, maybe it's not such a bad idea if at all it brings in good returns, and indeed it does boost the tourism industry in South Africa. And this is not something new that an African country has done. Tottenham's North London's rival Arsenal has a Visit Rwanda message on its t-shirt sleeve. Somewhere around here you'll see, Visit Rwanda, while UAE's, well, them, they have money. Two official airlines, Emirates and Etihad, we've seen them. They're the principal sponsors of Arsenal and Manchester City, among other countries that have supported this Premier League, because, as I said, it is something that is watched across the world, and so them having having this branding might help in the tourism industry. But as long as that money does not come from other sectors like education or other things that also are important, then I think I really don't have a I guess it's okay. I don't know how you feel about it, but you can tell me now. This report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes that is now saying that a lot of medicine available in the Sahel region are either substandard or out of date. And these drugs, they're withdrawn from the supply chain in Europe when they're about to expire, and to a lesser extent from China and India when they're about to expire. And then they're passed through seaports in Guinea, in Ghana, in Benin and Nigeria, and they're transported to the Sahel. Now, other countries are disposing of drugs that they deem to be not okay for their people to use. But because of corruption and other endemic problems that we have in this continent, we have no shame in allowing something that can cause serious harm to our people. How do you joke around medicine? How do you joke around drugs? Something that has expired, whose life shell is already past. I don't know if now they change the packaging and they change the date for expiry date. How do they do this? So they find their way. No wonder there are a couple of sometimes back last year when there was a cough syrup that was killing children in Chad and I think in Nigeria and in other countries. Now, if this is the case, then you know now what happens. So if those medicines the drugs have expired in Europe or are almost expiring in Europe, and to some less extent in China and India, they're removed from the shelf and they're brought to Africa. Do we not even love ourselves, even for the people who are engaging in this kind of trade? This is so sad. And then you wonder why we have all these weird diseases sometimes, or outbreaks, or these deaths that are so unexplained. So the problem with that is, once the medicines are diverted from the official supply chain, there is little guidance on how it should be used by the patients. So sometimes they don't even come with the manual or something, or some guideline on how to use it properly. And these deficiencies contribute to microbial and anti-malaria resistance. You've seen a lot of medicines, especially antibiotics. You find that they no longer are as effective. Now you see, this is what happens. This is so scary, because this is a matter of life and death. And for the people who even think this is even something that kind of profiteering one could, engage in, I don't know what happened to us. Because obviously it is some Africans who are bringing these things in. I absolutely believe that. Some Africans who have colluded with other bad eggs from, Europe and other places to come and kill their people here. That is quite something, isn't it? So this attack of Nigerians' electoral materials, I think, is becoming a bit alarming. Every now and then we've seen attacks on, as they prepare to go to the elections. Hold on, it is this month. Today is the 2nd of February. They're going to the elections this month on 25th. So 800 ballot boxes and over 200 voting cubicles were destroyed during an attack in southeastern, and these attacks that have continued. So if this is what we're having, do we not have security to protect the where electoral materials are kept and where voting will take place? Because this is alarming unless somebody is doing this on purpose so that we can have the elections postponed. I don't know what else will happen, because you can't electoral materials. Well, how does even the public or criminal groups able to access where the electoral materials have been kept in readiness for an election? Because it's just a few days away. So you would think that is a place that will have a fortified security, but no. So I think this is alarming, and someone should tell us what is really going on. And I know the chairperson of the Independent National Electoral Commission, I saw an interview he was doing the other week on BBC, and he was saying, elections will go as planned and nothing will change that. But with these reports, I think there's a cause to worry, and maybe somebody should tell us what is really going on. A quick one before I leave. This conflict between the Ethiopian government and the church. The Orthodox Church is the dominant church in denomination in Ethiopia. And there has been some wrangles between the leadership, but now I see politics has really, really, really found its way there. I tend to feel there are a section of the leadership that maybe was allied to Abiy Ahmed, and so I think those are the ones that have been kicked out. I'm not sure, or those are the ones that are leading now. But the ones that are there are saying that the government is meddling in church affairs. After the Westphalia Treaty, after the 30 Years' War, that was signed in 1864, I believe. Remember the 30 Years' War that involved the Roman Catholic Church? And it was a religious war that ended up claiming millions of lives. And at that time, the idea of state had not really been conceptualized in a way that we know it today. So they were fighting. It was a religious fight, and then it took a political turn, and then so many things happened. So after the Westphalian Peace Treaty was signed, there was a separation of state and religion, and that was one of the key tenets of that treaty. So that has remained, and that has been a practice world over, because before then it was the law was based on thou saith the Lord, and at that point it is the head of the Roman Catholic Church, because it was the dominant leader in the world at that time. So everything went by the book, and the church was very corrupt at that time, so there was a lot of protesting, and you had to follow what the church is saying, and the religious leaders were very corrupt. So there was a fight in that. So that led to the 30 Years' War that finally ended with the signing of the Westphalian Treaty of 1864. That separated the state from religion. As I've said, that practice has continued. And during the signing of that treaty, the idea of state, the principle of state and statehood was born at that time. And the church was told, you preach the gospel over there and let other leaders lead the church. And that's why, the Roman Church, they have their own small country, because they led the world before, the signing of that treaty. So they remained with their own small country there, named, called as the Vatican. But anyway, this is something that is worrying, because when politics is intermarried and has found its way in the church, because usually the church or religion will be the place people will run for refuge, or you will go and you'll feel you're safe. But now this is becoming very, very worrying. And they're saying now that they feel as though the government is really picking on them, and the government is really meddling in the church leadership. And when you look at some of the issues there, the breakaway clergy accuse the church of maintaining a system of linguistic and cultural hegemony in which congregations in Oromia are not served in their native language. That is ethnic balkanization, and the church is being accused of participating on this level of, of division. So that is worrying. I think that is worrying. And this is a story that has been, you know, it has been gaining momentum very slowly. And I just hope things don't get out of hand. Like, it's already enough going on in Ethiopia. So hopefully, Abiy Ahmed, separation of state and religion, that should continue. You lead the country and continue the mediation process with the TPLF, and maybe you can have some talks with the OLA, and just leave the church leadership to do what the church leadership knows to do. Don't meddle. So they're saying you're meddling. So if that is true, I think there should be some separation of powers there. It's very important. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogoto. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.